But now USAID, a deeply entrenched government bureaucracy, seems to be dragging its feet on the Trump-Pence agenda. A spokesperson told Fox News that the next step is a workshop on proposals and that it won't take place until January. By the way, that's well into the frigid winter months when these populations are most vulnerable. And the agency's announcement said nothing about cutting off funding to the UN, as Pence originally declared. So why are parts of the government defying the president's orders? Joining us now for reaction from Houston, Congressman Brian Babin, a Republican from Texas. And here in Washington, Nina Shea, an international human rights lawyer for over 30 years, and former Obama State Department official David Tafuri, who just returned from a refugee camp in Iraq. Congressman, let's start with you on this, because when I first heard about this, I thought, this can't be. I mean, you have Vice President Pence announcing that we are now going to be sending aid directly to the people who need it most. We're not going to go through this UN bureaucracy. And then what?
Oh, this is the same thing. This is what we call the deep state. This is USAID. This is the same organization that has teamed up with George Soros in countries like Macedonia. And when the vice president, speaking for the president as well, says that there's going to be a big change in USAID that will go directly to these persecuted minorities like Christians there, and then when the spokesman comes out for not only USAID but also State Department and basically pushes back against the administration, I got a real problem with that. The populations of Christians have fallen in these countries there, in Syria and Iraq, by almost 80%. And the UN camps are filled with ISIS infiltrators, and basically Christians do not go into these UN camps from whence come our refugees into our country. And so this is why it's so important for the tax dollars of the United States to go directly to these persecuted groups rather than through the corrupt and the obviously incompetent UN agencies.
Or purposeful. This is it seems purposeful. I mean, this isn't the first time USAID has gotten itself into some hot water. David, you just came back from this camp, and there's so many poignant stories and so much suffering that comes out of these places. But tell us what we are getting wrong, do you think, in this narrative so far?
Sure. So I was in Iraq about a month ago, and I went to Kirkuk and other places across northern Iraq. 2 weeks after I got back, the Iranian-backed Shia militias and Iraqi army went into Kirkuk and took back Kirkuk, which for the last few years has been peaceful and secure, held by the Kurdish Peshmerga. They displaced 158,000 people, many of which are religious minorities. There's now reports from a Christian town, Teleskov, in Iraq, that the Shia militias are actually persecuting Christians there. The problem in Iraq is not going to be solved by USAID or by the UN. It needs to be solved by the U.S. military and the State Department, and by putting pressure on Baghdad to pull back the Iraqi army and pull back the Shiite militias. This is a security problem. It's not something that either the UN or USAID can solve.
Nina, you've been studying this and following this and advocating for Christians in the Middle East, I think more than anyone I know, maybe,
years.
except Father Ben Keeley is
Yes.
the other one. But tell us why this issue is so incredibly important for people watching us tonight, what they might not know about what's going on.
Yeah, well, there's hundreds of thousands of Christians and Yazidis. These are survivors of ISIS genocide. Now, there's an inflection point now because the U.S.-led coalition has liberated their hometowns, and they want to go home. This is in Iraq, northern Iraq area.
Mosul?
Yes, Mosul, but that's a Sunni town now, Sunni city. But Nineveh province is where the Christians and Yazidis both live. And they're desperate to go back. They are very depressed. They've been in displaced centers for, this is the fourth winter. They've been streaming out of the region. This place is going to be devoid of, they're going to be erased. So
get me back to Pence.
Yeah,
Pence
the vice president gave a very decisive speech for swift help, for immediate help.
And
for
how much money are we talking about?
Well, it's, you know, we're probably talking about tens of millions of dollars could really help these people go back to their homes. And
it goes to the UN, and then what happens? If it goes to the UN,
well,
which Vice President Pence said he doesn't want to do.
Yeah,
really
let me cite some examples. There's the town of Telescope. This is the town which Navy SEAL Charles Keating gave the ultimate sacrifice to liberate this from ISIS. And there are Christians who have gone back there, and they want to live there. And the UN projects for them with USAID are fake. We have photographs that have been taken. The outside wall of a girls' school has been painted nicely with the UNICEF stamp all over it. Inside, we have photographs of rubble. It's really unusable building. This is a fake project. This is a list of UN projects that are yes.
There are many fake projects.
You know, there's the town of Tel Skyf. This is a place where that used to be a Christian town. The UN claims it's doing projects for the Christians there.
Not happening.
Well, the UN has moved ISIS families into that town.
Congressman, what can you do, what will Congress do to ensure that U.S. taxpayer dollars are being used in the most effective way to help the most desperate people? We know Christians have been left out of the refugee game here in the United States for too long. Trump's balanced that out quite a bit this year. But what will you and Congress do?
Well, Congress needs to step up to the plate and support the president's and the vice president's aims of giving aid directly to these persecuted minorities like this. And quite frankly, and Ms. Shays, she had a great op-ed with Fox News, which I read just today, and was talking about a school in Telescope where the formerly Christian.
Yeah, she is just referencing that. Yeah. But I want to get to this. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Congress has got to get on this. And if the government is working against the wishes, David, of the administration, the bureaucrats inside the government, I saw it during the Reagan administration all those years ago when the State Department was working against Reagan. That is completely insubordinate. And they're just running their own mini-government inside our government. You can't support that.
I, of course, do not support that, and that should not be happening. But there's a strange thing about what Vice President Pence tried to do. He tried to say we need to move our funding for refugees from the UN to USAID. But at the same time, the administration has proposed huge cuts to USAID, 27% cuts over the next 10 years. So how is USAID going to do more for refugees when it has less? Well, that makes no sense. But the bigger problem in Iraq, which people have to understand, is the administration's support for the one Iraq policy rather than allowing Christians and other minorities to have more power
Iraq was a disaster.
in Iraq.
Iraq was a disaster. It should never have gone direct. Trump, that's part of the reason why he won.
It's a political problem, not a funding problem here. Right. We gave $32 million to the Rohingya Muslims just 2 months ago, as we should have.
Yeah, we're helping people who need help, but these Christians are among the most persecuted, and the Yazidis as well. It's a great conversation, and no one else is talking about it. Congressman, I'm so sorry. We'll have you back. I'm going to be on this issue for years. Okay. So thank you.